Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. And I'm your host, Bill Whittle. How's everybody doing? Slow news week, huh? Here we are live, if you'll pardon the expression, on March 12th, 2020. There's really just one story in the world, obviously, right now. Historians would love to look back at this, and it's interesting. My attitude about things have changed to some degree. Hi, everybody. And really for the better, actually, in a lot of ways. I think the main story has got to be Bernie Sanders is slipping in the polls. Now, this is week two of the COVID-19 story having having reached critical mass, and there's a lot of things. I think a lot of things actually that look a lot better this week than they did last week, and I would be very curious to know if our friends in the comment section here, live, because it's the only live feedback I get, curious to know if people feel the same way. I feel like things are significantly better, and I'll tell you why. First of all, everything's been canceled. Disneyland is closed as we write this, as we record this. They announced earlier that Disneyland is closed as of today. The NCAA March Madness is canceled, or at least until rescheduled. Donald Trump gave a speech the other night about any travel coming from Europe has been put on hold for 30 days and so on. And so we're in the middle of this. And when we did the show last week, schools are closing around the country. All kinds of universities are saying we'll do online until that. Is that true, DGS 44? More will die. Bernie said that more will die from COVID-19 than World War II. Is that a fact? Well, I'm surprised he didn't say more will die than from the Civil War, because he was there to record it. I was talking with my sister earlier today. She's one of those people in a high-risk group. She's got and has had most of her life very severe lung condition, and so she's one of these people that are more at risk for serious consequences from this. And when I say that my thinking on this has changed a little bit, evolved a little bit, I'll tell you kind of how that procedure went. One of the I guess this is. I really do think this is in your blood. I just think that not the virus. What I'm about to say. I think it's just part of how you're built. To my utter amazement, well, maybe not so much my utter amazement, but in any event, I seem to be one of those people who's kind of wired to want to run toward the sound of gunfire. And the reason I say that is because when this thing started to break, we were talking about it last week. And I was talking about just how the panic is just spreading, and everything they're doing is just making the panic worse and worse and worse. My first reaction and inclination was I want to go down to the airport and catch this virus. That's what I want to do. I just want to go get it. I want to go get it right now because I feel like I know enough about it because I feel like it's going to be something I'm going to be exposed to anyway. So I'd rather just get it over with. I'd rather get the immunity to it. But mostly I wanted to go get it because I wanted to have it on camera. I wanted people to see how bad it wasn't. And that's an emotional reaction on my part. It's just like that's what I wanted to do. Wiser heads that share my same address than I convinced me that maybe this wasn't the greatest idea. But the thing I was telling her is, it's not just important to be courageous. It's important to be seen to be courageous. Not for your own personal benefit. This isn't virtue signaling. It's just that in moments and times when people are afraid, the first thing they want to see is that they want to see and hear from people that aren't afraid. And then you find out what is it that you actually tell those people. One thought that occurred to me just earlier today. I'm living my life exactly the same as I usually would. I am using a hand sanitizer, which I never did before, and I'm doing that to make my wife happy. And I'll do those kind of things to make my wife happy because she's undoubtedly right. It's certainly not going to hurt. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. But the thought I had earlier today is this: hand sanitizers for bacteria. I think I've heard if it's 60% alcohol or higher, it also works against viruses. We'll find out about that too. So what I was strangely enough thinking about today, we did a right angle I liked a lot called the fear virus, and it looked at fear as a virus. It wasn't so concerned with the actual medical implications of the virus. It was looking at fear as a sociological event, and that things like the news were carriers, and things like social media was carriers, and if you're very, very afraid of something, then self quarantine. Don't spread the fear. Don't spread the fear the way you wouldn't spread the virus. By the way, Lord Bios, I just want to tell you, and anybody I didn't get back to last week, I apologize. I greatly appreciate you sending me your email address. You definitely will be hearing from me. Oh, well, see this, and I apologize that I did not get back to you earlier. I really appreciate you getting in touch with me. It's been a very, very strange and busy week, and lots of things happening, wrapping up the Cold War. So I just wanted to apologize in public for that. And here, he's a man knows what he's talking about. He says that the hand sanitizers for bacteria and enveloped viruses like corona. So it's nice to have people know what they're doing. Anyway, here's a thought I had, strangely enough, and this, I don't know, it's just kind of out there, but I think there's something to it. The entire idea of a vaccine, forget the virus for a second, forget COVID-19, I'm talking about sociologically now. A vaccine is designed to introduce a weak version of a disease into your bloodstream, weak enough so that it may make you a little sick. Some vaccines have been known, especially the earlier ones, to bring on some mild symptoms. In fact, the first vaccines pretty much just brought on extremely mild cases of the disease, and as they get more refined, so on. But basically, a vaccine is a way of exposing a body to a weakened version of the disease, so that when the actual killer disease arrives, you know what to expect. Your immune system has learned what it looks like, and you're prepared in a way that your immune system was never prepared before it met that particular pathogen. And I had this thought on the way just a couple of hours ago, and that thought is, what if this entire COVID-19 thing, I'm not saying it's intended, I'm just saying what if the end result of COVID-19 is that COVID-19 is a vaccination for our society, in terms of these are lessons that we need to learn, and we're learning them with a virus that is not terribly deadly in terms of what some of these things could be. For decades, the single great worry among people who worry about big level things is this pandemic of a virulent, easily communicable virus. And that's what we've got here. But this one has a pretty mild mortality rate. In fact, a very mild mortality rate as things go. It's not the flu. It's worse than the flu. But nevertheless, it's making me feel like what this COVID-19 thing is doing is it's training our society how to prevent and minimize the spread of viruses throughout the society, and it's doing it with a pretty mild agent. And if you look at it that way, and I've started to look at it that way, then many of the things that we're seeing, and many of the mistakes that we're making, and many of the things that we're doing wrong and right, and especially the data that we get out of this, the transmission data. I wonder if it's possible that what's basically happening is we are, by happy chance, with all due respect to the victims of this, we are training our society on how to look at a major pandemic outbreak. That this relatively mild mortality, but high infectiousness, is a way for us to learn these lessons, and also a way to inoculate us against the fear. In other words, if people are afraid, and I think I've said many times, that I suspect what is going to happen, and I'm seeing signs of this already. That the fear is not going to die down for rational reasons. It's the people just get when they're just going to get bored with being terrified, and I think a better term for this, I don't know if anybody else has coined it yet, but what I think is going to happen is the whole society is going to just experience panic fatigue, and I'm getting a strong sense that we're seeing that already, that we're seeing panic fatigue. And again, if you go back to looking at society as a body, and how the body responds, then it's good to get the panic fatigue out of the way before something really, really deadly comes along. It's possible that this whole thing may have given us a tremendous head start on things like preparedness. It's showing us where the weaknesses are. It's showing us where the strengths are. And I personally have changed my mind about things like gatherings, large gatherings, because I thought that canceling those large gatherings and essentially trashing the economy was overreacting to the threat. I still do. But nevertheless, if you're one of these people at high risk, what is going to be interesting about this is, for epidemiologists, is we have started an experiment, the likes of which I've never seen before. And what we're doing now with things like closing Disneyland and turning just plain shutting down air travel to certain locations, everybody doing what they can to minimize contact, canceling school, all the whole shebang, right? We will learn something very important from this. And I know that businesses are getting killed, and I'm not saying it's a good thing under any circumstances, but if you think about it, you could look at this as a dress rehearsal for something much, much, much worse. And if it turns out that by breaking so many of these transmission chains through things like just through voluntary, quarantines and the elimination of things like basketball games and so on, if it turns out that that's the case, then what this COVID-19 thing would be for our society is in fact a form of vaccination. It's showing us how an infectious disease, highly infectious disease like a flu virus variant like COVID-19, it's showing us how it spreads. It's showing us all of the stuff that we already had some significant data on, but for the first time ever, it's going to be able to show epidemiologists statistically how effective are these fire breaks. And that's what, it's a drill. Yes, thank you. My God. M-Man. That's the word I'm looking for. Perfect. Yes. Congratulations. Thank you. 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 It's a drill. That's perfect. It's exactly right. Again, all due respect and sympathy to people who are going to pay a price for this, and I'm going to get into the statistics in a minute. But yes, it's a drill. It's a drill, folks. This is a drill. We are learning how to break virus chain infection. We are learning how to protect ourselves, both society and individually. Uber is learning how to control outbreaks. Uber and Uber Eats and things like that. For example, small little thing, but also valuable, are things like now on Uber Eats or any of these food delivery services, I guess, but certainly for Uber Eats, there's an option now where you can tell your driver that respectfully you would just like them to leave the food at the door. And if it turns out that people start doing that, and let's say somebody's got the disease and they don't even know it, and let's say it's in an infectious stage, so I get a guy who's delivering my food to my door in a plastic bag. He leaves it on the door. I thank him. The tip's automatic anyway. He goes and drives off, continues with his disease. Now I bring inside a plastic bag that has a live virus on the bag. I can handle the bag normally. I can pull the stuff out of the bag. I can throw the bag into the garbage as long as immediately, fully aware of it the whole time, I then immediately get my hands washed with sufficient level of alcohol to kill viruses. You may say, well, there's some things that could get past that. That's true, but we're talking about huge numbers now. We're not talking about individual cases. We're talking about huge, huge numbers. And that, kind of information is going to be really, really, really interesting and useful. And I think, yes, bless your heart, and man, thank God, it's folks, it's a drill. It's an exercise, a training exercise. Training exercises, as you probably know, are dangerous. The rehearsal for the landing on D-Day was almost more deadly than D-Day. The 800 people were killed training for D-Day when a German U-boat sank a couple of transports. But it's a drill, and the reason we do drills, pretty much exclusively in the military, or fire drills for that matter. But the reason you do a drill is so that you number one, you figure out where the weaknesses are. What didn't get covered? Okay, this was a drill and there was nobody manning that station, and if this had been an actual attack, we would have lost the ship because there was nobody there doing that. So you get to learn that, but also something you learn from a drill is repetition and speed. You learn to do things efficiently by repeating them. The more you repeat them, the more automatic their behavior becomes. That's essentially what flight training is too. When I was learning in gliders, I probably had, I could look up the exact numbers, no less than 30 rope break simulations, simulated rope breaks, where the instructor would release the rope early, very low, simulating a rope break. And I did at least 30 of those, and I kept training them. And since I was friends with the flight instructor, I said, where do you normally cut these things off? He said, usually we take you up to about, we don't do the rope break lower than 400 feet. And I said, how low would you be willing to do it? And he said, well, with you, I'd be pretty comfortable. You don't seem to panic. So we ended up doing rope breaks at 150 feet, 200 feet, which is low. And developing that reaction. Do I have the altitude to make this turn? What is the wind doing? Am I going to go to that field or am I going to go to that field? That kind of thing. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. So we're taking an enormous hit financially, and we will recover from that. There's nothing wrong with the economy. I don't think there's anything wrong with our economy anyway. I think if I had an extensive stock portfolio, which I most certainly do not, I wouldn't be too terribly worried about that aspect of it. I know a lot of businesses are losing revenues, and I'm not trying to minimize any of that. But anyway, it could be a drill. And now I'm going to put on my spectacles. I was talking with my sister on the phone. I called her because I knew she was going to be a little nervous and freaked out, and everything's, just getting... It seems like the hysteria level's down to me. It feels down. It feels like, okay, now people have accepted the fact that this is here, and now it's a question of, well, what do we do about it? And that's the adult response. I'm much more impressed than I was before. Howdy. My God. There's a video camera there. I thought the show was audio only. Now, I don't have the link to this because it's coming to me from the Apple News app, and I tried to get it in advance. But Natasha found some terrific information, and I was looking, and it's updated March 12th at 3 p.m., so that's Eastern time, so 6 hours old. And I saw this stuff, and I read it, and I kept thinking, okay, this is really good information, and it looks legitimate. Who's it from? And then I found out it was from Johns Hopkins University. And I said to myself, oh, dear God, thank God. For those that you're not familiar with the story, I'll get to these statistics. They're very encouraging, and they're hot off the presses. They're 6 hours old. Johns Hopkins University is worth a 60 or second detour, or probably more like it, 60-minute detour, knowing me. In the late 1800s, up until well through the Civil War, up until the turn of the century, practically, American medicine was beyond pathetic. You didn't have to speak Greek or Latin. Some places you didn't have to learn how to add or divide. You went to a basic kind of training, and this basic sort of thing was pretty much based on the idea of the body's diseases being the result of the humors being out of balance, and so you would bleed somebody to cut the cholera, not the cholera, oh, for the love of God. I'm not going to look at the list because this one I want to get on my own. Phlegmatic, bile. It's like, oh, that was dumb. Anyway, there's too much blood, so you got to let the blood out. And while all this was going on in the starting around the late 1800s, schools in Germany and France especially were making tremendous strides with microbiology, and they were using microscopes, and they were starting to identify bacteria, and then they were starting to identify the fact that there is a virus, even though it was too small for them to see, and so on and so on and so on. And American schools were appallingly bad, just awful, awful, awful. And then a group of people decided we want to build the best medical school in the world. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Germany and France. We're going to see what the best schools there look like. And then we're going to turn this into a research university, and it's going to be the best in the world. And that was what Johns Hopkins University was and is. The four men credited for essentially eliminating yellow fever from the face of the earth, at least the ability to do it. And stop these horrible plagues that swept through America in 1793 and 1878, among many, many other times. All four of these guys, I think, were graduates of Johns Hopkins University. They were Walter Reed, outstanding example, and the rest of his team. So when I found out that this data was from Johns Hopkins, I was not only relieved, I was ecstatic. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, obviously, and I'll see if I can find the link, or actually, if somebody here could get the link, it's great. I'm looking at an article called "Don't Panic: The Comprehensive Ars Technica Guide to the Coronavirus." Ars Technica is a news feed kind of thing, but this is from Johns Hopkins. So I'm just going to read you the stuff that I read to my sister, and some of this news is so amazing that it just completely blew my mind. So, it talks about where it likely came from, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. Where are the symptoms? I got some symptoms. We'll talk about that in a minute. Where is it? Mortality. Hang on. Yep. Okay, so where is it? Here we go. So now we get to the interesting stuff. How severe is the infection? This is from Johns Hopkins as of 12th of March, 2020. I literally couldn't believe this. I'm going to quote directly now. Most people infected will have a mild illness and recover completely in 2 weeks. In an epidemiological study of 44,672 confirmed cases in China, authored by an emergency response team of epidemiologists and published by the Chinese CDC, researchers reported that about 81% of cases were considered mild. Now, this is in China. The researchers defined mild cases as those ranging from the slightest symptoms to mild pneumonia, to no symptoms. 81% of the cases in China were considered mild, and of the people who came down with the mild cases, not a single person died. Not one. This is the part where I just lost my mind. Otherwise, about 14% were considered severe, which was described as cases with difficult or labored breathing, an increased rate of breathing, and decreased blood oxygen levels. 14% of the cases in China considered severe. Here's the money sentence. None of the severe cases were fatal, all recovered. I'll finish the sentence and I'll put this into even more perspective. Nearly 5% of cases were considered critical. 5% critical. These cases included respiratory failure, septic shock, and or multiple organ dysfunction or failure, and about half of the people who developed critical symptoms died. Now, I've got a little chart to show you here, and maybe it got copied over, and I know where this is in my text. Let's just talk about this for a second. First of all, those numbers are when I read 81% mild, I thought good. Then I read 81% mild, and none of the mild cases, not one of them, was fatal. I went, unbelievable. Then I saw, 14% severe, and I thought, here it comes. This is where my sister's going to be. And I read the symptoms for severe, and then I thought, all right, what's the mortality rate there? Zero. That's from China. Now, I want to talk about China. And I want to talk about Italy, because these are the two places where we're seeing the most activity and the highest numbers. Italy's easier, so I'll do Italy first. The mean age, the median age, or whatever, the correct mathematical formula to determine what the average age of the population is in Italy is, I think it's 7 or 8 years older than in the U.S. It's almost a decade older. It is the oldest society in Europe. And now, if you'll give me just one moment, I'm going to find a bar graph that also comes from Johns Hopkins, and this is very, very, very important. Very important. So Italy, the entire case here is that Italy is, I got this picture here. Let me just pop it in. Has a population that is significantly, in fact, it's practically a decade older than the U.S. So hold that thought. Where did that damn thing go? Hang on, sorry. Sorry. Just disappeared onto my desktop, and that desktop is about as well organized as everything else in my life. There it is. Okay, so here's the chart this is from the actual article. I want you to take a look at this. Okay? COVID-19 cases and deaths by age. Obviously, you can see that the cases are in blue and the fatality rate is in orange. Now, I want you to just take a look at these numbers. We're talking about worldwide. I want to come back to Italy in a minute. But the reason I want to talk about Italy first is actually because their population is significantly older. Now, having an average age that's maybe 7 or 8 years older than America may not seem like such a big deal. But take a look at this chart. What this chart is saying, that if you look at the age group on the top, the over 80, there's the fatality rate, okay? So over 15%. If you're in the 70 to 79 bracket, you have half of the chance of dying that the 80 years or older have. If you're 60 to 69, you have half the chance of the 70 to 79s. If you're 50 to 59, you have half the chance of the 60 to 69s. And so when you're dealing with a disease that is taking people, mortality now, we're talking about deaths, when you're dealing with a disease that is killing old people much, and by the way, look at 0 to 9, zero. There are 0 deaths among children, right? So if your entire population is considerably older than the American population, then you can expect that you are going to see a higher percentage of total mortality because of that. Okay, ecological fallacy. Well, Lord Bios knows what he's doing, but in any event, it seems to me that from that chart, which is showing how age intensive this particular COVID-19 is, it seems to me that if you've got a disease that is, it just seems logical, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that if you've got a disease that is primarily taking the very old and then clearly showing a relationship, a dramatic relationship between age and mortality, then it seems to me logically that if you have a population that is older than ours in terms of its average age, then you would have a higher mortality rate than you would in a younger country. That's what it seems like to me. So there's that. And then the final thing about this thing is China itself, and the mortality figures that I quoted before were from China. One of the two things that I hadn't really thought about, and because I've never been to China, but many of you watching this have. My sister was there, of all people, and as a matter of fact, she got out. She was doing a job in Italy and got back about 2 weeks before this thing became, really on the map. So she's been to China several times. I haven't, but I think many people have enough people have backed this up. So here you go. The two things she noticed about the time in China was how closely packed people are. That she would constantly, no matter where she was, she could feel people breathing on her neck. And that was kind of weird. And she said the other thing that's not widely appreciated outside of China is how much the Chinese people, especially men, spit. It's a social norm. Spitting is a social norm in China. My wife told me that she's had friends who personally went to China, and women in a like not quite an opera house, but something like that, in dresses, were spitting on the carpet. I would imagine that if you've got people who are packed cheek by jowl, and one of the cultural norms of that particular society is to spit on the ground, and if you pack all of those people into mass transit and things of that nature, and never cover their mouth where coughing, then it seems to me, again, a not unreasonable assumption, that the rates of transmission, the number of cases as a percentage, and the number of mortalities as a percentage would be higher in a society than one like this one. And if it turns out that this whole thing is an exercise in terms of how this thing spreads through modern society, then there's a couple of other advantages that we have in the United States, and my guardian angel of error on this one is watching every word I say. So God bless you, Lord Bios. I mean that from the bottom of my heart, and I owe you an email and many, many things. So there's some other advantages. I'm told that the U.S. has more intensive care beds per capita than any country in the world. That's a result of our private health care. The syndrome of Canadians coming across the border to America to get an MRI when they're already paying for an MRI in their free healthcare system, but they want one sometime, within the next year or so, is a result of the private medical practices that at least still to some degree remain in this country. And since they're, I forget what the state was, or the city, but there was a statistic that said there were more MRI machines in like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, than there were in all of Canada. So there is a tremendous amount of relative to other countries. If everybody decides to go to the hospital, we're in real trouble. But nevertheless, we have a tremendous backup in terms of intensive care. But here's my point: if it turns out that when this whole thing is over, and we find out that doing things like closing Disneyland and so on has an impact, then certainly we can look at how flus have been regular flus. This is not the regular flu. This is much deadlier than the regular flu, but it seems like the transmission vectors are similar, and so we can ask ourselves some questions. Would American society, on a per capita basis, be significantly reduced to risk if for no other reason that so many of us drive automobiles? I mean, think about that. I know in cities like New York and so on, it's a subway or taxi. I get that. But in Los Angeles, for example, anybody who's going to work in Los Angeles is going to work either by themselves or with one other person. We're not being packed into trains. And in Tokyo, they have guys with white gloves to push you into the train tight enough so that the doors can close. So I'm wondering if our automobile culture, which essentially encapsulates every single human in their own little biologically hermetically sealed little virus capsule, it seems to me like that cannot help but have some major effect on transmission compared to a country where everybody has to ride in mass transit, public transit. It just seems logical to me. I can't think of any way that wouldn't be true. So there's that. And I don't know. I am really rapidly turning from like, oh my God, I cannot believe people are hoarding toilet paper. Well, we're kind of past that now. And now we're seeing these things that are happening, and we're not seeing them because they're happening not because healthy people really needed to worry, but they're happening because not everybody in the country is healthy. And we will find out from disease vector data, epidemiological data, when it's all said and done, whether all of this voluntary social quarantine works. And I'll bet it does. And I'll bet it works actually pretty well. If you look at it in those conditions, then things look a lot better than they do if you don't. It's also again, I don't know the number, but I know somebody who does. And anytime I make a mistake on the show, the great thing about the show is every time I make an error, which I think has happened twice in 245 episodes or whatever it is. See, I wasn't even right about the number of episodes. But it seems to me, Steve Green pointed out that last year, seasonal flu, we're not talking about COVID-19, last year, seasonal flu was worse than usual. And I think he said 14% of the total population came down with the flu last year. So, if that number is true, and I'm getting to understand a little more about this, Lord Bios, if that number is true, if 14% of the population last year caught the flu, then it seems to me that this disease is going to hit people where the flu is most common, because it seems like the transmission vector, coughing, sneezing, having a lot of colds come with flu, and flu produces cold-like symptoms. As cold essentially is a mild, special sort of a lightweight kind of flu. But that's also telling me something too. Natasha, living in Moscow, said she would get the flu once a month and sometimes twice a month. And she's been here for 3.5 years and hasn't gotten sick once. I don't remember the last time I had the flu. I cannot remember. I really can't. And that seems to indicate that it's going to be the northern cities where flu is spread by colds and that kind of thing is where it's going to be probably more likely to get hit. But now you're talking about another factor that's in my sister's favor, living in South Florida. And Mike Massetti makes a comment there. He says, I truly don't understand the panic. And I didn't understand it last week either. I understand it. I understand it a little better now. I like coming back to this idea of the sociological virus as kind of a model of the biological virus. And if you want to stretch that analogy and maybe stretch it to the breaking point, but you could make the case that the initial panic and all of the stuff we saw and people hoarding all this other stuff, you could make the case that this is like the fever. This is the onset of fever. It's not, we're not used to the fever yet. It's the onset of the disease. It's this change from being healthy to not being healthy. And a lot of things happen very quickly then. And then once you have the fever and the flu and you got the cold and the stuffy nose and you got the joints and the headaches and all of this stuff, you have to wait it out 3-4 days or whatever the case may be. But by then you're used to it. It's probably not any better than it was when you first got it, but you're at least used to it. And when you first get it, I'm talking about individual case. That's when things are at their highest contrast level because you used to be healthy. And by the way, you get better much more slowly than you get sick. And so when you come out of a flu, it's kind of like there's no moment when you just went, I'm not sick anymore. You just get less and less sick until finally you realize, I guess I'm over it. But when it comes on, usually within the space of several hours, you know something bad is happening. And I'm wondering if that's not what's happening to society, that this initial outbreak of just total kind of hysteria was people just reacting to that initial fear infection as kind of as like a sociological fever. I would like to just take a quick moment. I don't do this very often, but I'd like to poll the live audience, which at this moment consists of a massive 76 people, but that's okay. Thousands of people watch this on YouTube. But of the 76 people that are watching now and have accounts in the live chat room and a lot of the same names all over the place, but if you're one of those people that's never really made much of a comment before, I'm really curious to get some feedback on this. One question, it's just one question only. So here's the question, and I'll tell you whether to answer yes or no. Do you feel that the fear levels, the hysteria, a better word, that the hysteria levels are lower now than they were last week, and that people are behaving in a more mature and more educated fashion? Do you believe that the ambient fear level is down compared to last week? Yes, I believe it is, means that the fear you think is decreased. No, I don't think so, means it's either the same or higher. We're getting some no's, people saying, all right, so the first one we get is a no. No. Everybody's saying much higher today. Wow. Not a single yes. Wow. That's really quite striking. Okay, well, let me ask you this. Just not a single one. Everybody's saying people are more afraid than they were last week. All right. All right, so got it. New question. We're just going to let the no's break out. So if you haven't answered already, stop answering now. We're going to ask another question. And that was not the reaction I expected. A couple of yeses. I feel it, and maybe it's just inside of me. So let's stop the answers on this one because I got one more question. Actually, I'm talking about the overall fear level now. Did what I read from Johns Hopkins University reduce your fear? Yes or no? Here they come. Yes, 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 yes. No, and these are pretty much the inverse. Okay. Now some people are saying no because they weren't afraid before. A lot of the no's are saying that. Okay, so most people are saying yes, they feel better. They feel less fear having read what Johns Hopkins reported, and many of the people are saying no, I don't feel better as a result of it. Are only saying that because they didn't feel terribly worried in the first place. So, I think I think that's a really valuable lesson for me now. Now, the only thing that I'm not sure of, and there's still so much more research for me to do, but at least now I have a credible, and I mean a gold mine of information. They've got an incredibly beautifully detailed, extremely comprehensive sets of data on just about every aspect of this. And furthermore, I do dearly love the fact that it's being updated, if not every day, then maybe once or twice a day. I understand the sample size is very low. And DP Wellman says their audience is smarter than the average bear, however. I haven't seen any evidence that that might be true, but I'll just take your word for that one. And we're getting, Shuowick says that South Korea is more trustworthy than China, and their data is promising so far. Yeah. Okay. So, and once again, M Man, who gets wins the internet for the word drill, says that owners of sports teams and leagues have never been in this situation, so I understand their fear. Now we're kind of on where we were, where I started, and I think it's the main psychological and sort of political point. We had we have always been afraid, and rightfully so. Everybody's got it. We have always understood. Anybody who has any kind of a sense of anything has always understood that the great threat to humanity in an age of international travel, rapid international travel, is a virus with a very high mortality and and a relatively long incubation period, meaning that it could be spread widely before people are symptomatic, and that makes isolating and quarantine virtually impossible. So we're treating this, society is treating this outbreak. You could make the case, and I've made the case, that this society is overreacting to this based on the mortality numbers. I did read the Hot Zone. The Hot Zone's fantastic. But you could also then make the case that this is what a vaccine does. It it prepares you. and it teaches you. And when this happens again, we will have a much better idea of what to do and how to do it. We are now experimenting, and that's what it is. It's all experimentation because, as MN pointed out, no one's ever been here before. Uh, the NBA has never had to deal with this problem before. It's never had to deal with it. And everybody's erring on the side of caution. That's the side you should err on in all of it. But we we may be really, really, as I'm talking about as a world society now, we may have been given a tremendous, tremendous gift here. I have to say this again and again and again. I mean, no disrespect whatsoever. And I have enormous sympathy for people who actually die of this disease. I don't mean to trivialize that at all. If you lose somebody you love, it doesn't matter what the mortality rate of the disease is or any of that. I don't for a second want to be considered that I'm flip about this in any way. But talking about it on a global scale, this could be an incredible, an incredibly lucky thing for us if you think about it in that respect. If it turns out that the hysteria generated by a viral pandemic has been acted out, at least in its initial stages, and that this virus is not nearly as deadly as some of the ones that we've been worried about, then it seems to me quite a compelling argument to make that it is a drill, it's a warning, it's a practice run, it's a simulation, it's whatever you want to call it, and and that's a perspective that probably wouldn't hurt us to have. As I mentioned last week, one of the things that was so clear in the aftermath of the horrible flu pandemic of 1919 and 1920. Everybody calls it the Spanish flu. I read a pretty compelling book about that outbreak. And the reason I don't like to call it the Spanish flu is because it appears that it actually may have originated in America. Almost certainly, when they really started tracking down the vectors, it looks like it got introduced to U.S. Army camps that were preparing for World War II, even as World War II was closing out. But the reason they called it, Kansas, the reason they called it the Spanish flu is that Spain was the only country really that had the courage to not apply censorship to their newspapers. And since the Spanish newspapers were the only ones that were reporting it, it seems a little unfair to call it the Spanish flu when the Spanish were basically the only government in the world at the time that was doing what should have been done. So anyway, yeah, and people are talking about the supply chain. The Spanish Dave Wellman says it's the Spanish flu, neither Spanish nor the flu. It's not Spanish, but it was the flu. It was the M1 flu. It was the first identified flu strain, and it was so virulent that people were dying as a result of their own immune systems. That the strongest people in society were dying because their immune system had been so unbelievably activated. Yeah, I don't particularly have a problem with calling it Wuhan virus either. I know that makes me a racist and stuff, but you know what? One of one of the things that we learn about this is that. So we'll talk a little bit about China, then we'll do some questions. There has been speculation that this was something that broke out of a biological lab or something. That Wuhan was where the Chinese had a biological weapons plant. That doesn't seem likely to me. The more I read about it, the conditions in this food market seem to be perfect. So, again, now I'm on my very best behavior, and I'm doing my very best to be accurate about here. And certainly, when I make a mistake, I try not to make it twice. What appears to be the source of the human outbreak. What I was going to say is that, look, viruses don't appear out of thin air. They can mutate out of existing viruses, but they don't just magically appear. They don't come down with the clouds or anything. They have to live someplace, and they have to live, and virtually all of these viruses live somewhere in the animal world. So you might hear of an avian flu, which means that the birds carry it. And if the flu makes the jump from the bird to the humans, then humans came down with something called the avian flu. Swine flu is carried by pigs in the wild, so to speak. And then and then so on and so on. Ebola lives in a population of monkeys and so on, and I think so did yellow fever, and so on and so on and so on. But when you look at they try to trace the source back to this particular market in Wuhan, the so-called seafood market. But what they found out was that there was not only large numbers of people crammed into a very small area, and not only was the area completely filthy and sanitary conditions were just non-existent, but also that virtually every kind of animal that could be eaten, and the Chinese eat just about everything, and so humans do, but Chinese not terribly picky about that kind of thing. It's hard to imagine a better virus distribution system if you wanted to break the virus out of the animal kingdom and into the human kingdom. It's going to be tough to beat a Chinese market where all of these live animals exist, and you've got people cutting things, and there's blood everywhere, and it's almost impossible to imagine a more likely way to get it from the animal host into the human population. So can't really blame that on China, but you can blame China's response to this. Now, I've had several discussions with my wife and other people uh, who think that China is the future. I'm not saying Natasha necessarily believes that, but that's certainly the impression she had before I corrected her to the best of my ability. And the reason I've been saying that I'm not worried about China as a country, I'm talking about a world threat, I'm not talking about biological stuff, I'm not talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about China, capital C China, as China. The reason I'm not afraid of those people as competitors in the world is because I know for a certain fact that communism is not capable of dealing with the information age. But there is so much cultural homogeneity there. And when you have so many people who are socially pressured to not stand out, you're creating a situation that makes for excellent engineers but poor innovators. And I've never felt that China had the cultural mojo to basically become the leader of the world economy and the world pop culture, any of that stuff. I just don't think they have it. And I think the reason that the American dream is universal and the reason that American movies are largely universal is because they come from everywhere, and this society has so many different viewpoints built into it. In other words, American movies are more popular in China than Chinese movies are in America because I think they're more appealing in general. Now, Red Skirt says, if I visit China, I'll be scared for our future when you return. I understand all of that, and certainly it would help. I know that everything's brand new. I know that Dubai looks like Tomorrowland, and I think there should be a constitutional amendment that basically says that it is constitutional requirement that the tallest building in the world be in the United States, in the continental U.S. So I get all of that. And I understand that they've got a lot of money, and I understand that they graduate more engineers than we have college students. And all of this, I get it all. I do. But I just don't see them capable of dealing with what the world economy is in term. I'm not saying they can't handle the world economy. I'm saying that in the age of information, a guy in a garage can change the world. And that things like what we're experiencing right now, the free exchange of ideas made possible by the miracle of the internet. I don't think they've got it. Trevor, now this is a fascinating point. Trevor says there's a lot of violinists in China, but no Beethovens. It's a pretty short sample time yet. That may or may not be true, but that somehow had a ring of it, some kind of ring of truth to it. This is not like well, it is kind of a bash China session because, frankly, China has been for decades now behaving like well, he's just not playing by the rules. Donald Trump came along and made him play by the economic rules, and that took a big hit on him. And I would be very curious to know what people think this is going to do to China specifically and to our entire idea of a world economy in general. I've said a few times that I've had one landing in an airplane that I consider to be out of control, that I consider to be a crash. I was in a glider and I was looking down trying to find a target. I was trying to do an accuracy landing and spot land. And I had my eyes down looking for this target and I wasn't looking at the horizon and the glider bounced on its nose and it went up and I told the story a bunch of times, get into this pilot-induced oscillation and I'd had total of 10 flight hours or something and all I can remember is bam, 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 bam and just my fillings being rattled. And I called my flight instructor, who's also my friend, and said, I think I just crashed the airplane. He said, are you okay? I said, yeah. He said, is the airplane broken? I said, I don't think so. He said, well, then you didn't crash the airplane. You just had a hard landing. But the point he said was, he said, you just were given a tremendous gift. I've told this story many times here, and you're just going to have to listen to it again. He said, you've been given a tremendous gift, Bill. You've just had the living daylight scared out of you, and it didn't cost you anything. So it makes me wonder what the future of the world economy is going to look like. It's not a question of the whole product is made in China. If one piece of the product is made in China, then the product stops getting made. If you really want to speculate wide, and I do, you might be able to look into the future a little bit and say that what this virus has done has shown us, number one, that we should not be so dependent on foreign suppliers. Number two, we are way too dependent on one specific foreign supplier who doesn't play fair and whose ability to communicate openly and honestly when the stakes are worldwide is, let's just say, inhibited. If you throw in the fact that American ingenuity, despite the best efforts of Barack Obama and the entire Democratic Party, has been able to turn the United States of America into a net exporter of petroleum, of energy, and that it looks like now, with our ability to get to oil that we couldn't have gotten to before, and at a higher price, that's a big part of it. You might also be able to look into the future and say, so not only does this shock us into the idea that we can do something here for 67 cents, but we can do it in China for 63 cents. That makes sense. If everything's running smoothly, it makes economic sense. But it makes me wonder, too, if this might not lead to something I've been thinking about, and that is absolutely true that China has lower labor costs than we do. But that's changing. Now, as their standard of living rises, there are lower labor costs somewhere else. But my point is, I wonder if we were to really be able to go full tilt on our energy, would some manufacturing, come back to America, understanding that, yes, the labor costs are higher here, but the energy costs are lower here. And I'm wondering if this coronavirus, this COVID-19 thing might be enough to change some minds. I personally would like to see, if it were me, I think all of our investments in relatively low labor cost manufacturing, I think every penny should be spent in Mexico. Every penny. And that would be great for Mexico. And the more successful Mexico becomes, the less of a border problem we have. And if Mexico becomes more prosperous than America, then they'll be putting up walls to keep us out. I would like to have the border with Mexico be the same as the border with Canada. And in order for that to happen, Mexico has to be a successful country, and a country that's not a place you need to flee from because of the economic hardships. So if it were up to me, and I don't think it should ever be up to anybody, but to the degree that we could relocate industries that heavily dependent on relatively low cost labor, I'd love to send that to Mexico. And then if I had a choice of a strategic ally in the world without abandoning our existing allies, mind you, but if I had to romance one country in the world, I'd be the one that President Trump just did, and that's India. I'd be going after India real hard. I really would be courting India in a big way. India and China would have been, there would have been, the history of the world would have been nothing but bloodbath scale wars between India and China that made all of Western war and history trivial if it hadn't been for the Himalaya Mountains. If those two societies were in direct contact, then what we would have seen is unimaginable. But the Himalayas are there, thank God. Nevertheless, as Lenin said, quantity has a quality all its own, and I would like to be allies with people who are on the border with China, who don't underestimate China, who are competing directly with China in the Indian Ocean, and who have no illusions about what that country is about and its strategic goals and so on. And I do not include Pakistan in this equation. I think clearly, if it turns out that Osama bin Laden is hiding for, 10 years, a mile away from the Pakistani military academy, then no, there's a difference between Hindu and Muslim in that regard. So anyway, it's all real interesting. I'm very I'm a bit surprised at how emphatic the idea that people think people are more scared now than they used to be. Maybe it's just a personal thing. Maybe it's just me just coming to grips with new data, being wrong about a few things, that kind of thing. But in any event, I'm feeling much better. And of course, the real sickness really isn't here yet. But as people have pointed out, the results from South Korea are very encouraging. It's interesting to see what's going to happen here, and we have had. I also learned over the last week. Somebody said we're probably 50 days behind China and about 11 days behind India in terms of how the thing works. So we're going to see whether or not a 10-day head start or a whatever head start is enough. And we're going to see whether or not these circuit breakers that we've thrown, and we've thrown a bunch of them. Closing Disneyland is throwing a circuit breaker. We're going to find out whether it was effective or not, and I can't see how it won't have some positive effect. But anyway, there's an awful lot to learn here. And like that story about the glider landing, it would be nice if we learned important and valuable lessons at relatively low cost. So anyway, I am going to take a couple questions from Facebook, and then I am going to then Elvis will leave the building. Just finished episode 11 on the Cold War, writing it. And I got one to go, and this one will be relatively easy. And I need to get this off the plate. There's a lot of stuff that I need to move forward on, and it's been really taking an awful lot of my time. And I'm very happy with it. By the way, I think episode 6 has been released. I think tomorrow night, Thursday night, they release 7. 6 was I Like Ike. 7, as I recall, is Playa Huron. 8 is Cuban Missile Crisis. 7 is Bay of Pigs. 8 is Cuban Missile Crisis, and 9 is Cloaks and Daggers. And that one is by far my favorite episode. It is by far my favorite. It's that's the one that deals with all the cool stuff with the Project Azorian and the SR-71 and A-12, mostly the A-12. Corona Project satellites. I just love that episode. I think it's awesome. Anyway, let's see what's going on in the old Facebook comments, shall we? And then I think we'll slowly wind this little party down. Let's see. Well, I'm just going to take them in kind of in the... Wow, there's a lot of comments. Well, let's see what we can do here. I'm just going to go down the list, and then we'll see. Our friend Dave Olson says, I'm sorry, Bob Knife wants to know, what does it take to be a known miscreant? Well, the first thing it takes, Bob, is perseverance. And our known miscreant has been miscreanting for a long, long time. He's very good at it. He's done it consistently and thoroughly. And I don't want to be a guy who's you know, I never say never, but let's just say that if you're gonna out miscreant our known miscreant, you got a lot of miscreanting to do. I can put you in touch with somebody who knows more about that. If you're watching live, Foghorn is your man. He's the contact person between miscreantism and the civilized world, and I think he's probably the guy you want to talk to. Okay, let's see. Dave Wellman, there he is, who's also with us live. Previous Mr. Bill Whittle has opined we might as a species be getting dumber, no question about that. Is the latest susceptibility to media-led FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt evidence? Yes and no. I'm suddenly, I don't know, maybe I'm ahead of the curve, or maybe I'm just so far out of it, I'm just completely dead wrong, but that's clearly not the case. I get the feeling that this thing is going to be very good for us, and I don't have a strong foundation to build that on just yet. I just have a feeling, and I think the reason I feel like it's going to be good for society, not I'm happy people are dying. I just think that something's going to come out of this. Is that this is the first time that I'm aware of that people have had to be serious about something. You know, I mean, really serious about something. It's the first time that virtually half of the population has ever had to deal with something really serious. Now, us older folks, living under the shadow of 25,000 hydrogen weapons, would remember that whenever there's a particular break in relations with the Soviet Union, or there's a crisis, or there's something, we would suddenly be like, oh, is it now? Now we're going to have to deal with what we've been afraid of this whole time? But it seems to me like this is the first real serious thing that this entire society has had to deal with in quite a long time. And so we'll find out. Certainly the initial stage wasn't great, and of all the things I see, the thing that makes me most enraged is watching the media terrify people in order to achieve a political goal. That, frankly, I never will find the bottom. Every time I think that there's a bottom to what these people will do, I'm always amazed at their ability to keep digging. I have Dave, I don't know what to base this on. I really don't. And most of the evidence really kind of points the other way, but some gut instinct tells me that this is going to be a finest hour kind of thing. I don't know how else to describe it. I just feel that way. And this is very recent. This is in the last 2 days or so. So we will see. Dave Olson, I'm really hoping that the Strata Cruise is still on. I am too, Dave. It's out in the middle of May. It's 2 months away. And my attitude on this is going to be it's on until we're told that it's not. But to be honest with you, I think it's not, breaking any news to say that it's looking less likely pretty much every day. The question will be, will this thing burn out in time for middle of May. And to be honest with you, I've got a feeling that even by the middle of May, even if the thing were just to subside somehow, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen, I think people are going to be a little wary of cruise ships for a while. So look, here's one thing I can promise everybody. If it turns out that the cruise line makes that decision, I heard Princess decided to make that decision. But if it turns out that this is the case, certainly we'll let everybody know. And this is the point, and please keep this in mind. If that happens, this cruise is not canceled; it is rescheduled. That is a guarantee. Needless to say, if you feel like refund, I don't touch the money. I never did, but we're going on a cruise, by God, and we are going on a cruise, and we're going as soon as not just as soon as the cruise lines say it's okay, as soon as people feel comfortable doing the cruise. So it's still on until it's not. That's our policy here, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm still planning on going because it could turn out that way. You don't want to preemptively cancel something if you don't need to, but right now it's looking like rescheduling is probably likely. But I'm still planning on being there May 15th until I hear otherwise. So a couple from Eric Blake. We'll just read them in order so we get to, hey, Bill, here's something you ought to ask ourselves. All the panic over the coronavirus has led to stock market falls, fears of heading into to public events, etc. So it's pretty clear the left is trying to use people's fear to turn them against Trump in the election. Could they succeed? You know, I don't know. My sister, who is, she's not unreasonable, but she's definitely a liberal, was saying, well, I mean, in all honesty, what do you think about Trump's lack of leadership on this? And I said, I don't think it could be much improved. And so she is, and I said to her, just remember that everything you hear is being told to you by people who openly admit that they want people to die from this so that they can get Trump out of office. That's coloring the news that you get. One thing I think is, here's something it's just an interesting point. It's crossed my mind once or twice before, but thank you, Eric, for bringing it up because it probably needs to be elucidated a little more. I think we could probably say with some confidence that at the very least, the media is overselling this thing. And since this is the currency that those people deal with, I'll deal with it in their currency, which doesn't mean it's my currency. We all clear on this? What the media and the left is doing is they are basically, and they're saying it openly. They used to say we wanted an economic recession, a crash, so that Trump could be voted out of office. But this is a special benefit for them. Now they're openly saying, and not so openly, but it's crystal clear that the lunatics among them are saying, oh, I hope this thing is really bad. I hope this disease wipes out this country. Not me, obviously, meaning the commentator, because I'm a rich liberal and I'll be fine. But let's hope that enough people die so that we can run Trump out of office. And people said Trump ought to resign over the COVID-19 virus and this kind of thing. If it seemed to me to be certainly way over manufacturing the fear side of this. So I think two things are in play here. One of them is, I find it hard to believe that anybody will blame Donald Trump for the actual disease. I mean, that's just a. So the question is, will they be able to spin the narrative into the Trump administration botched preparedness and so on and so forth? But here's where they may have made, once again, where they may have blown their own foot off here. If they are, if they're overselling the results of this virus, and people don't die to the degree that they've been told they will, then what happens then? Well, needless to say, it goes down the memory hole as far as they're concerned. But what happens then? They have basically said that Trump colluded with Russia, and there's no evidence, and there's Ukraine, no evidence, impeachment, no evidence, all of this stuff. Now they're telling everybody we're going to die because of Trump. and we're not. That much I'm certain of. And so if the media has told people that Trump has so badly botched this uh, COVID-19 thing, then, and they've certainly oversold the mortality, then it could actually end up completely backfiring on them. Could end up being the kind of thing where people realize this, that they're hoping for people to die so that they can win an election they have no chance of winning otherwise. So we'll see. It's going to get clearer as time goes on. I personally don't find any tremendous fault in the government or in the way they've handled this. I would certainly think that I would like to have seen prior to this more resources dedicated to this kind of thing. And once again, we're back to maybe we learned something from this simulation, from this close call. Maybe this will scare us enough to be investing more money in in vaccine preparedness and the ability to manufacture vaccines and procedures and all the rest of it. I think that would be a valuable thing. And look, I am philosophically, personally, and emotionally 100% on the side of as little government as possible. But if this meant that government funds had to be spent on something like this, then to me personally, this is what governments are for. We have a strategic. We don't need it anymore because of how frickin' bright we are. But we have and had a strategic oil reserve, and I think it's in the interest of the American people, even if the government had to buy every drop of that oil and build the hole to put it in. The idea of a strategic oil reserve, to me, is not only a good idea, it's what a competent government does. I understand completely that vaccines, especially with these kinds of diseases, with a virus like COVID-19 or any flu virus that mutates quickly enough and is able to disguise itself as well as the cold does, or nearly as well. I understand that you cannot stockpile a vaccine. That a vaccine is something that you can stockpile smallpox vaccine, but you can't stockpile vaccine, the general purpose vaccine. But what you can do is you can certainly make investments in the ability to rapidly produce copious amounts of vaccines, and that would be, I think, one of the few things that I think we could learn on a government level in this. Otherwise, I think they've done a fairly good job. So, look, when I hear people saying Trump is responsible for the coronavirus, there's a percentage of people that think he's responsible for the tides. So, if it turns out that's the case, then that's the case. As far as the stock market is concerned, when the stock market crashes, it's crashing because people are selling, and it really is panic. And I don't have to explain this, but I'm going to anyway. Basically, people see stocks declining, and they predict that the stocks are significantly going to decline, and so they sell. And the more they sell, the more the market goes down, and the more people sell, and so on. This is not the first you've ever heard this, but it is sound advice. You don't take a stock market loss unless you sell less than what you paid for. If you ride this thing out and hold on to your stock, you haven't lost anything. In fact, you make a pretty compelling case that this would be a good time to start buying some stock because you're getting some good deals. People wanting to cut their losses have made all of these sales. That drives the number down. But as Trump pointed out, and as needs to be pointed out repeatedly, this is not a financial crisis. This is a healthcare crisis. And so since the suppression of the market is not based on market forces exactly, really is an act of God kind of thing. It seems to me that once this thing goes, the economy will not only be in the same shape it was. It's going to take a hit from the loss of production and things shutting down, no question about that. But um, but now it seems the time to buy, because when people sell in a panic, they're trying to cut their losses. But if you don't need to sell and you don't sell anything, then you haven't lost a penny until you sell it. And if it turns out that 6 months from now or 3 months from now, the market is back where it was before, you haven't lost a thing. And if the market's higher as a result of the confidence gained from having been through this, then you've actually made money. If there was some economic, something like the 2008 crisis, where it was a collapse of the debt structure, that this this kind of pathological defect in finance was finally coming home, I'd feel real differently about this. But this doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be the case that people who have had to sell because maybe they need their cash out or whatever, but most of it's just plain panic. So people have sold, so their stock prices go down. Nothing in the economy caused that crash, and it seems to me that that it should be able to come back, and you get some real bargains. And I think it'll come back pretty quickly too. I think, Red Scourge here, he's talking about stocks. Looks like he knows what we're talking about. If you buy a company with a market cap under 50 billion, you are playing a risky game. Ensure that you have some index funds. It's really hard to beat the index average. Yes, so that's an excellent point. The point is that this economic downturn, which is a result of the virus, is not going to hurt the economy long term, but it might dry up the capital for certain companies that don't have enough capitalization, and you may end up putting money into a stock that then goes to zero. But Boeing is 50% off. It's because air travel's just, no one's traveling by air, and Boeing had some problems with its reputation with the Max and all the rest of that stuff, and that's an interesting Stratosphere launch story. The story of the 737 Max, and what the real story of that airplane is, and why that particular system was installed, and what actually happened on those two crashes. But in any event, now's the time to buy. It's a real bargain, and you start to wonder. I know nothing about, but it seems to me that if people who would not normally buy stocks are now buying some stocks because it appears to be a bargain, then it's also possible that as the market recovers, as the COVID-19 retreats, people go back to buying stock that they may have sold. Ending may be a bump. Could be a bump. Who knows? I don't know. People know more than I do. But in any event, that's what it looks like to me. Just feels like to me. Hey, next question is from Eric Blake. What do you know about that? Hey, hello, Bill. Hey, Eric. How's it going? So kudos to Tulsi Gabbard for sticking in after the entire party apparatus kept keeping her down. So I'm curious what her chances are and what's motivating her to stay in as long as she has. I think, you know what it's like? I think dropping out of the Democratic primary in 2020 was like leaving a football game with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter because you were down by 3 touchdowns and you were sure the game was over and you just wanted to get your car and beat the traffic. And then on the radio you find out that your team came back and rallied and you won by 3 points and you missed it. That's what I think. She is still there on the podium, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, look at her possible outcomes here. Bernie's done, which means it's her and Biden. Biden's fallen apart. I think there must be a large number of people who were once in this race who are now thinking, why did I get out? I think getting out was kind of a panic move. I think, looking back on it, it's recent history, but I think what probably happened was, okay, so we got all these people, we got 5 or 6 serious contenders, and then Bernie comes out of the gate with the first 3 that just by coincidence happened to be very strong for him. And then everybody realized, oh my God, we're going to nominate an actual by God socialist. And so Biden suddenly becomes there. And now people are saying, well, now it's just Biden and Bernie, so get out of the race and support Biden. And that's what, Buttigieg and all the rest of these guys drop out and do that. And now Bernie continues to tank. and it looks like it's all Biden, but Biden is not going to make it. He's not going to make it to the convention. He certainly will not. He will certainly not make it to the November election. When I say won't make it, I'm not saying he'll be dead by then, but I am saying he will be utterly incoherent, more so than usual. And and so Tulsi Tulsi could find herself at the Democratic convention and be the only person that has run the entire primary with a chance of being elected, only because she's the only one capable of moving under her own power. I mean, that alone is the only reason why she should be there. I think it's brilliant, and I think a lot of people like Buttigieg and so on are saying, "Man, why did I let them force me out of this thing?" Because I'm no doubt that the Democratic Party put enormous pressure on all of these people to get out, and not only get out but support Biden, stop siphoning votes away from Biden, and so on. But my God. I just want to say one more thing about this, and I think it's time for me to go home. And I'll do one more after this, but then I want to go home. But here's the thing: Biden was prone to gaffes, and obviously, and there's no question that Biden's mental abilities have been degrading, certainly during the course of the Trump administration, and they weren't particularly stellar, even at his prime. But without question, we've watched a tremendous decline in his memory, and that is a sign of the onset of Alzheimer's, and then a sign that occurs later. And I know this from personal experience, is after the memory signs start to arrive. Once you start to see this person can't remember things that they should be able to remember, in many cases, probably most cases, dementia sets in. And dementia, in most of the cases, is like a feral level of aggression. And Joe Biden has always tried to say, I'm a friendly Joe, everybody loves Joe. He's not. He's a mean guy. He's mean to his staff and so on. But he's at least had it under control. What we're seeing now is that if Biden is going to go to a meeting of, go to a rally of his supporters and basically tell a guy wearing a hard hat, a union guy in a hard hat, telling him to F off, then the dementia is going to essentially evaporate the only thing that Biden had going for him, which was, he's a nice guy. I mean, maybe not the smartest guy in the world, but he's a regular guy. I mean, things like Obama. I'm an Obama Biden, a Biden Obama, whatever he said. That kind of thing. That kind of thing is the kind of thing that you can make a mistake if every word you say is watched. You can occasionally, trip over words and stuff. But to go to a rally and say, "I'm Joe Biden. I'm running for Senate, and I want you to take a look at me," and to repeatedly forget which office you're running for. That's And what does that say about the Democratic Party? What does it say about the party leadership, which are the most cynical bunch of mean-spirited, disgraceful, honor-free, character-free, morality-free bastards that I've ever seen in this country? What does it say about them for propping this guy up and hoping he can limp across the finish line? And if it seems to me that that watching Biden's deterioration is corroding the sane Democrats' belief in their party further and further and further and further and further. The people who used to be Democrats because they were hardworking blue-collar workers look at this whole leftward shift, and they look at a guy who's like going to become a socialist. He's going to eliminate, coal and natural gas, and he's going to eliminate all these things. He's going to eliminate their jobs, basically. And they're thinking, my God, they're going to elect a socialist. And then they go to Biden, and then they see Biden in action, and they see how clearly incapacitated he is. You think, and I'm sure this is the case, that what's left of the decent, hardworking Democrats in the world are thinking to themselves, I can't do this. I can't. There's no place for me to go. No place to go. This will be probably, we'll see if we can have a conversation about this next week if it turns out that we don't have, to cancel the show because we're busy on body bag duty, which I suspect is not going to happen. But I've been having discussions and been thinking a bit about this. Roger Simon article actually got me started thinking about this. It is starting to look like that there's a real possibility that that the 2020 election might be the end of the Democratic Party. And I'll just make that case real quick. Yeah, and I was going to take the next question, but it's a coronavirus question. So let me just end with this. So in modern history, which is by definition the time that I've been aware of things, that's the definition of modern history, is how long have I been aware of something. That's modern history. And you can take that to the bank, and it's nice because it continues to change as I forget things and as I learn new things. But in modern history, we've seen two cases where the Democratic Party was convinced that they lost because they weren't liberal enough, and then they launched a real liberal candidate. We saw it in 72 when they nominated McGovern against Nixon, and we saw it in 84 when they nominated Mondale against Reagan. And both of those were landslide Republican victories because the left was convinced that they had not gone far left enough, because the left doesn't have to go through what we go through. We have to hear about left-wing policies because, number one, we're subject to them, and number two, it's all over the place in the media. We understand what the left is about. We hear their arguments all the time. They don't hear ours. They just don't. Was it Pauline Kael who said, I can't believe Nixon won. I don't know a single person that voted for him, and she doesn't. But that's the echo chamber. So stay with me on this now. In 72, they tried it, and they got walloped. And that led to Jimmy Carter, who was certainly perceived to be more moderate. In 84, they got walloped, which led to Dukakis, who was just plain incompetent and kind of a Mondale light. But in 92 led to Bill Clinton, who was the Democratic, he's the Democratic super candidate. Appeals to everybody and charming, and he's slow about the whole communism thing and so on. So here's the thing. In 72 and in 84, they had a bench. They had a bench of young politicians who were up and coming and capable, and who had national exposure or starting to get it, and certainly had the charisma. They had the ability to get elected to the top offices. And not only is the existing Democratic Party candidates in there, Donald Trump is the youngest of them, of the three final contenders for the Democrats, and he's 73. Not only do they appear to be short of young people, but during the 2020 primary season, the 2020 primaries is the Democratic showcase for their upcoming talent. It's a determination to see who's going to be the nominee, yes, but what it really is, it's like, and here's our 2024 model of the brand new Trabant. And it looks exactly like the 2023 model. And so whatever up-and-comers there are in the Democratic Party, we saw on the stage, and people just utterly rejected them. So let's just look ahead. I don't see any... The only way that I see Donald Trump losing this election is if people like you and me are convinced that there's no way that Donald Trump can lose this election and we don't go out and vote. But barring unforeseen circumstances, if Trump wallops Biden or Bernie or whoever, the Democratic Party is also split demographically. All of the young Democrats are far to the left of the older Democrats, which means that as a voting bloc inside the Democratic Party, they're increasing. And they are not running against the Republicans. They're running against the system. They want... thought I saw something move. They want a complete restructuring of the system. Okay, so now 2020 is over, and Trump is reelected, and they're all bitter, and then you basically got this. What happens on the first Wednesday of November when everybody's so furious that Trump was reelected? Do you really think that these young radicals are going to come out and vote for Biden? Because they're not. They've already said they won't. They can't win without him. And what happens after that? I think what very likely happens is that the Democratic Party does what happened to the Whigs. It was the Whigs versus the Democrats. And then enough of the Whigs decided to take this radical position of being an anti-slavery party specifically, and became the Republican Party. And that left the existing Whigs in a pickle. Many of them felt the same way that the Republicans did, because the Republicans were born from the Whigs. So many, if not most, of the Whigs simply became Republicans. But those few Whigs who were pro-slavery couldn't join the Republican Party, so they became Democrats. And they didn't stay Whigs. This is my point. They didn't stay Whigs because they knew that Whigs can't win. They can't. You can't take half of their party away and then expect to win. So I think this is exactly what the Democrats are looking at. The socialist part of the party, the young part of the party, is not going to sit there and say, well, we'll wait till we're 70 and then we'll give a shot. They're going to conclude the way that they always have concluded. They're going to say to themselves, in their own unique little fascist fashion, they're going to say to themselves, well, we gave socialism a try through democracy. Now we're going to have to go and get it through other means. And so they're going to likely, if I had to bet, I'd say they would start something that looked like the American Socialist Party, something like that. And they'll take 20% of the population with them and maybe 30, 40% of the Democratic Party, something like that. If they do, if they split off into a radical wing of their party, then that means that the Democratic Party that remains, the rump of the Democratic Party, the ass's ass, if you will not be able to win because enough of their party has left. Now they're two parties. And that means that all of the young people, all the enthusiasm, all of the demographic growth would go to the American Socialist Party, or whatever you want to call it. And that would leave the people who are stranded in what's left of the former Democratic Party with a choice. Do we want to go join the socialists, or do we want to bite the bullet and become unenthusiastic Republicans? And that's the only choice they have. And I didn't think that such a thing was really possible. But that's exactly, apparently, from my reading, that's exactly what happened to the Whigs. They basically spun their ideology, the core of their ideology, spun out from the Whigs to form the Republicans, and then people had to decide, do we want to go with a more ideologically pure version of our core ideology and join this anti-slavery party? Or are we so pro-slavery that we're going to bite the bullet and become Democrats? And that's what happened. And that's what could happen. Not saying what it is, but it's leaning that way. If the demographics were reversed, if it turned out that it was the older Democrats who were the socialists, then I would say that the loss in 2020 to Donald Trump would mean that the people looking at the future of the Democratic Party would say, okay, we got to go back to being more moderate. But that's not the case. If they lose, and I think they're going to lose, and I think they're going to lose big, significant numbers of these people are utterly convinced that they would have lost it. There's a guy in our building here, and I caught a glimpse of him once, who's got a bumper sticker that says Bernie beats Trump. And when I have a little bit of free time, I might leave a polite message under his windshield wiper saying that Bernie couldn't even beat Biden. And then I will repeat, Biden. But they believe it. And mark my words, there's one thing I'm sure of, and I'm sure of this because I've heard it from many different people and I've seen it everywhere. If they nominate Trump, if they nominate Biden, and that looks like the case, and Biden loses, and that looks like the case, then half of the Democratic Party, or a third of it at least, the young third, the social justice warriors, will be convinced that he lost because he was not socialist enough. And that's when they're going to pack their bags and go. Because I think we can all agree that Bernie 2024 is not the kind of investment you would want to make right at this point in hats and t-shirts. So already these young socialists are saying things like, "Well, Bernie kind of showed us the way, and we're gonna have a post-Bernie kind of socialism, and it was Bernie who gave us the hope." And they're turning Bernie into kind of Lenin, you know, and and Bernie's not Lenin. Bernie's Lenin. Last thing, and then going home, I was taking a shower, and because I do that occasionally, and I was thinking, most of you have heard it by now. There's an audio quote, probably a video quote as well, of Bernie saying, talking about the Soviet Union, and people are talking about food lines in the Soviet Union like that's a bad thing. Food lines aren't a bad thing. Food lines are a good thing. Food lines are a sign that people are getting food. They're not starving to death in the streets. Food lines are a good thing. And I thought to myself, Bernie, whenever you see a line, that's because there's a shortage. And if you see a line in Disneyland, that's because there's a shortage of available boats to take people through Pirates of the Caribbean. A line is a sign of a shortage, and food lines are signs of food shortages. If you're saying that the history of the world, let me rephrase that. If you're saying that here in America we have a choice between starving or getting into a food line, that those are the only two things that have happened in American history, either starving or getting into a food line, that's it, then you're out of your mind. A food line, to say a food line is better than starving is correct, but to say that that's the only choice is ridiculous. We don't have food lines in America not because people are starving, Bernie. We don't have food lines in America because people are starving. And God, if only there was some food we could line up for it, what a great thing that would be. We don't have food lines in America, Bernie, because we have an incredible excess of food produced by our economic system. And if you're basically saying that food lines are good, and that is a direct verbatim quote of what you said, and it's not taken out of context because you went on to explain it. If you're saying that food lines are good, then you are saying that you don't understand anything. You are saying that a shortage of food is a good thing because the only alternative to a shortage of food is no food. But what may become clear to you, if you were to simply get out and walk around America a little bit, you'd find that there are not two choices, starvation or food lines. There's actually three. There's starvation, there's food lines, and then there's plenty. And we're not talking about how do we get to the plenty. We're in the plenty, and we've been in the plenty since we've been here. To say that it's either starvation or food lines is to show that you're just an absolute. You know what? What it shows is that you're not that stupid. You understand this on some level. It just means that if your best argument for communism and the execution and murder of tens, if not hundreds of millions of people, if your best argument for that is the ones you proposed, which is that food lines aren't a bad thing, or that I've been to the mass transit system, I've been to the metro, it's the cleanest mass transit system I've ever seen, the metro in Moscow. There's no garbage there whatsoever. And there are beautiful paintings, and there's chandeliers everywhere. And if you actually believe that chandeliers and paintings in the subway station are worth millions of people's lives, and a life of poverty, starvation, hopelessness, and alcoholism, if you think that all of that is offset by having nice train stations in a few stations in a country that covers a sixth of the planet, those train stations don't look like that in Ekaterinburg. They don't look like that in Novosibirsk. They don't look like that anywhere. They don't look like that in Vladivostok, and they don't look like that in the enormous distances in between. A few metro stations in the capital have very, very, very nice decorations. And if you think that that outweighs capitalism, then what that tells me is that in the entire spectrum of things to offer for socialism, in the entire spectrum of things that people would want to have socialism in their lives for, the best example that you can come up with is they provide better decorated train stations. That's it. That's all you got. That's where you went because that's all you had. The reason we should go to socialism is because they have food lines, which means they have food. Also, they have very, very well decorated, beautiful, and exceedingly clean public transit system in one part of the city. Wow. That's it, huh? It's a great line. It's not mine. Some comedian came up with it, and I don't think it was Yakov Smirnov, but it's like in Soviet Russia, you have lines for bread. In America, bread lines up for you. It's absolutely true. Was it Ann Coulter? I don't know. Somebody said it. It's great. In America, bread lines up for you. Walk into a supermarket, any supermarket in America, and you will see the bread lined up for you. Was it Yakov? I'm surprised. Yeah, it sounds like him. So, you know, I don't know. I really do think that these people have failed. I really do. And people are saying better red than dead. That's a false choice, too. Better red than dead. Okay, but wouldn't it be better to be free than red or dead? Wouldn't that be a better choice? If you're saying, I'd rather be a slave than be dead, that's what you're saying, that's a choice you may want to make, but wouldn't it be better if there was a third choice, because there is? What if it's not like either I'm a slave or dead? What if it's I'm either a slave or dead or I'm free? Wouldn't you pick the free? I'd pick the free. When you say better red than dead, or when you say, the whole food line argument stuff, it's like you're leaving out an important choice. It's not starvation versus food lines. It's starvation versus food lines versus prosperity. And when you say it'd rather be red than dead, it's not red or dead. It's red or dead or free. You're leaving out a choice. And you're leaving out the best choice, by far the best choice, and you're leaving that choice out because you're running against that choice. Idiots. Anyway, it's been a fun time. Hey, look at that. 2 whole hours, just a little under, of nonstop jibber-jabbering, I guess some people would call it. Anyway, I think I'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge, made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are very, very grateful. And as always, we'd love to have you be one of them if you're not one already. And as far as I said, we don't know what's coming. We don't have any idea. So as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, I'm going to be in Miami on the 14th of May, getting ready for our cruise on the 15th of May, until I hear otherwise. And I think that's the smart play. You don't know what could happen. Once something has been rescheduled or postponed, it's done. Maybe things will get better. I don't know. It's not looking that way, but we'll see. We'll see. So anyway, you guys be careful out there. That Johns Hopkins studies can be found at Johns Hopkins University's webpage. Just look for it. It's updated daily. I did not invent those statistics. To be honest with you, I wouldn't have had the nerve to invent statistics that looked as good as those statistics did in the face of what I've been told so far. And special thanks again to Lord Bios, who sits there quietly pulling me back from stepping over cliffs and things like that, and to all the rest of you as well, and all the support. It's been really, really great. Courage, who knows? What's that line from? Hang on. Oh my God, how do I not know this? No. It's Apollo 13. It's Apollo 13. It's like this is going to be a catastrophe for NASA. It's going to be a catastrophe, and there he stands, man. Gene Kranz says, "No, sir, I disagree. I think it's going to be our finest hour." I have that feeling. I really do. I don't know why, but I do. Let's see. Anyway, ooh, Roy Hamill has a cool idea about starting something like a 3D version of the Stratosphere Lounge. We really ought to do this in Star Citizen, and that's coming. And for those of you that don't play, you know what, guys? Maybe we should do this in the not too distant future. I know that Foghorn is usually still here. I know Lisa's here. We could do the Stratosphere Lounge using FOIP, and we could set it in some scenic location, and we could stream it out that way. You know, we do the whole Stratosphere Lounge that way. So yeah, here come the crew, the guys that make this stuff actually happen, the guys that actually keep the organization running while I'm off. You know, talking about Bay of Pigs, Foghorn, and Lisa, and all the rest of them. So yeah, not next week, but maybe soon. We'll do a Stratosphere Lounge from a scenic location, and I'll have the facial tracking on there, which is not good enough to do the work I want to do, but good enough to give you a general suggestion. You saw some of that I put out there almost a year ago now. So we'll play up, do some practice on that, and then you know, I can kind of set it up right so that I could just walk. I could walk for or drive for an hour. As long as I'm looking at the screen, we could do it that way, I suppose. As long, especially if Foghorn was streaming it or something, I could just be looking at the camera, and I could be driving in a rover across the surface of a planet, and we could do the whole show that way, and that could be fun. Yeah, it'd be definitely fun. All right. Anyway, I'm heading home. Thanks for all the people who make this possible. Thanks for all the people who've been so incredibly helpful in the Star Citizen universe, and is already having an effect on people who just are curious about how so many people could behave so professionally and well and maturely and be so eager to help people and all the rest of it. So already it's starting to have an effect. So that'll do it, and we should be back, and we will be back. Am I going? I have to check my travel schedule. I'm sure we'll be here next week. So until then, you guys, you know, be careful, and I'm not saying don't be afraid, but be sure you put your fear in an appropriate size box and do your best to keep it there. And we'll get through this just fine. And it may turn to be way forward now, looking back on the whole thing. This COVID-19 thing may have looked like, you know, a major blessing for all of us. Oh, and thank you to Merlin for your offer as well. Didn't know if I saw you there or not, and I'll get back to you on that one too. Just had a lot of stuff I had to close out this last week, and things are developing so fast that it just was tough for me to really get on that. But thanks again for all of that too. So all right, I will see you guys later. Some of you I'll see sooner than others. The rest of you I'll see next Thursday night. And you guys take care out there, and we'll see you next time right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.